Hello, everybody. This is episode 43 of Streets and Eats. And today on the podcast, we are going to be talking about our favorite Californian national parks. Welcome to Streets and Eats, the travel and food podcast dedicated to taking our listeners to the sights, sounds, and flavors of fascinating places near and far, both on and off the beaten path. We're Jim and Corinne Vale, and we've been traveling internationally and domestically together for decades, visiting more than 90 countries and all 50 states in the USA. We'll share all of the local knowledge and food expertise we've gathered through years of living as expats in Asia and Europe, as well as traveling with families spanning multiple generations around the world. Join us each week for a new adventure.
Hi, everybody. Well, the first thing I want to do is thank you for downloading and subscribing to our channel, because let me tell you something. We've had a serious uptick in the last week, and we know it's all up to you. So kudos and thanks.
I think it's also another sign that the times they are a change in.
I think so, too. I'm so excited about that. I'm so tired of being cooped up. Now, we don't really have a whole lot of plans for the summer, mainly because our family is in upheaval. We've got one daughter moving across the ocean. We've got another daughter moving, but we don't know where yet. And we only have two. So that's 100% of our daughters moving. And so we're just we had originally planned on doing this huge road trip. And it kind of breaks my heart not to do it. But at the same time, I don't mind, getting things settled and relaxing for the summer and then heading off in the fall.
That's right. Well, and not doing a road trip in the summer when you don't have to is not a bad thing.
That's true.
Fall is a much better time to do it.
But I think what's going to end up happening is the road trip's probably going to put off almost for a full year, maybe even more. I mean, we just don't know.
Well, we definitely have some international travel coming up. So
we are, by the way, we just bought a house. We just bought a house in January. And one of the things we're doing, if you're interested, is we will be putting our house on Airbnb.
That's right.
And so if you're interested in coming up to the Seattle-Tacoma area, our house is cute as can be. It's perfect any time of the year. And it's not up yet, but we'll let you know when it's up.
Sure.
But, we'd love to have you come by and sort of support us by renting our house for a week or so.
Yeah, drop us a note on the Facebook page and we will work something out.
That's right.
Okay, so let's get started. Now, we've got our list of our favorite national parks in California.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of parks in California.
There are.
I think there's more national parks in California than any other state. Is that correct? I believe it is.
I think so, as far as the pure numbers go, for sure. And maybe even size-wise. There's quite a few. And in the interest of transparency, I think we should say right up front, we have not been to every single one of the national parks in California.
Which ones are we missing?
I think Lassen
Volcanic.
Lassen, right?
Because the roads to Lassen are only open like 2 months a year because it's through mountainous territory that is just snowbound. It's not open very long. We do have some really good friends who've been there, but it's not something we feel comfortable about talking about yet. So we might have to add it to our favorites after we've been, but we haven't yet to go there. I think we've hit all the other ones.
I'm pretty sure we have as far as the national parks go. Now, there's some national monuments and other places that I don't think we've been to every single one of those. But
Oh, no. I don't know if we'll ever get to all of those. There's a lot of national monuments.
So the biggies, of course, are that everybody thinks of are Yosemite, Sequoia. Those are probably the real big ones. I really like Sequoia. But the problem with Sequoia is it just got hit by a huge forest fire.
Yeah, a couple of years ago. And we were there. I got to tell you, driving up to Kings Canyon in Sequoia, that's one of the prettiest drives I've ever taken. It was beautiful.
Yeah, and we really enjoyed the area around the parks. But the devastation in the parks was very sad. So it doesn't really make our top list.
No.
I think in a few years, after things start growing back, that's kind of a completely different type of habitat post-fire. And it can be really interesting and a great place to go. But that will probably take 4 or 5 years before things to really start to recover a little bit. And luckily, the big sequoias are okay.
The main attractions.
Yeah, so that's still pretty good.
We still got to go to the General Sherman.
We did get to the big trees for sure, and they are super impressive. And getting out and walking around in those areas was really nice because it's not burned in those areas. So that's cool. The other big one is Yosemite.
And we've only been there one time, and I was so excited to go. And it's beautiful.
It is.
But
it's really crowded.
Yeah.
And
it's crowded all
yes,
year long.
I think that there are times of year when it's not as crowded and the weather's nicer. There's water in the waterfalls. So it could be that there's times to go where it would have, I think, left a different impression on us. But as it was, super crowded. We had a good time. Is it my favorite national park?
No.
No.
It's not even my favorite California national park. It's not even on the list. And that's because as much as I did enjoy the scenery, the wildlife, I didn't like the park management, and I didn't care for the crowds. So instead of being negative, we're just going to gloss over it, and we're going to move on to the things we do love.
Yes. So,
what's your number one?
Okay.
Or should we go number 3 to number 1?
Let's go number 3 to number 1.
Okay. Let's see if your number 3 is the same as my number 3.
All right. My number 3 is Redwood National Park.
Redwood National Park is your number 3?
Yes.
Really?
Uh-huh. I really love the redwoods. Being down near the coast, it's a little bit cooler, and just the massive trees. The sequoias are really impressive as well, but it's a completely different environment. And I just really love the redwoods. There's that one loop that you can drive through if you're in a hurry. That's really easy to access and good hiking. And I saw my first huge banana slug in Redwood National Park. Pretty impressive. And I can remember going there as a young child and climbing the trees and getting pretty high up there, in my mind anyway, and not being able to get back down, having to work up more courage to climb down than it took to get up.
Well, I've only been to Redwood National Park one time, and it's actually been almost 2 decades. So to be honest, my information is pretty old in my head. Now, do I love redwood trees? Yes. Do I love camping? Yes. Do I love national parks? Yes. Therefore, it should be high on my list. But since I don't really remember it that well, it doesn't even make my list. Again, when we go back down there, we're going to have to revisit it, and then maybe it'll be higher because, of course, it's an amazing park. Given that there are so many amazing trees to see, and when we were there before, we camped right in them at the KOA, and that was a lot of fun.
Oh yeah. It's a great place for kids. Like I said, I went there as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
The trails are relatively flat. You're not climbing a lot like you would in Sequoia or Kings Canyon. And the weather's always really nice, pretty much all year round. So in the summertime, it's a good place to go to get out of the heat if you live in a hot area. But of course, there's going to be crowds in the summer. But you can go other times of the year, and it won't be nearly as crowded. Whereas like you were saying with Yosemite, pretty much crowded all year long.
Pretty much.
I guess wintertime, there's some parts where it's not too bad, but then it's wintertime and you're in the mountains.
And again, I just didn't enjoy the management of it that much.
A really good tip for visiting Redwood, and I think that's pretty true in most of the national parks, is that you are going to be experiencing some pretty spotty cell reception. So having an offline map on your phone is a really good idea if you don't have the hiking maps that you can get from the visitor center. That's probably the best advice I can give for that. Always
bring lots of water.
Lots of water.
It's California. Even though it's in the shade because it's trees, it's still hot and dry.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the redwoods is your number 3, but my number 3 is Channel Islands
Mm.
National Park. And here's why. We went to Channel Islands during the height of the pandemic, summer of 2020. And guess what? We were able to do it because we were outside the whole time. We did wear masks on the boat, and that's probably why I liked it the best anyway. First of all, we didn't get to do much during the pandemic, so it sticks out as a star place that we got to go to. But secondly, it's the Channel Islands. It's always beautiful. The weather is perfect. It's in Southern California, and you have to take a boat to get there. And you could do all that during the pandemic. That rates really highly in my book. Yeah, I loved it. And so basically, we got on the boat and we went out to the Channel Islands themselves, which are beautiful. A lot of people can kayak out there and hike and stuff, but we just stayed on the boat and went around the islands and saw lots of birds. And what else did we see?
Some sea life.
Some sea life, yeah.
Sea lions. A lot
Some
of cool stuff.
kayakers.
But the stark beauty of the islands themselves is one of the reasons you go out there.
It's a little bit different than other national parks in California, too. You know, it's not the typical go in and go hiking and everything. You can hike on the islands, but there's no trees or anything. So you've got to really be prepared, and you've got to set up your boats ahead of time so that you can jump off and then you can get someone to pick you up, which is completely doable if that's what you're into. I think if I went back again, I would do the kayaking around the islands because I think the islands themselves are really beautiful. And really, to me, it was about the sea life anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I might hike up to the lighthouse. There was this cute little lighthouse on one of the islands that's really pretty. And I bet it has great views from there. There was an arch, which is always fun when you're in the sea to see the arches.
Oh, yeah.
So to me, plus I just love going into Southern California, the area around Channel Islands. You pick up the boat in Oxnard, which is actually a big Navy base area.
Sure. Point Mugu and Port Hueneme are right there. And it's also really close to Ventura, which is a cute little city.
And there's, the good thing about California, we were there in the summer. It was strawberry season. The strawberries were nice and tasty and plump and so good. And of course, the Mexican food is always so good too. So there was nothing about that trip I didn't like.
And we were able to pretty much just roll up and get tickets and get on.
Yeah, but that's one of the reasons I think we enjoyed it so much, because it was the pandemic, and national parks that were allowing people in were just smashed with people because you couldn't really do anything except outdoor things. And this was one of those outdoor things you could do, but it wasn't crowded. Even our boat, I think the capacity was, I think it was 75 and there was like 30 people on it. It was so fun.
Yeah.
It was really fun. Everything about it was great. So Channel Islands kind of really was my number 3. Now, the next 2 parks, I think we probably are in agreement about.
Yeah. I agree. We probably will even have the same
order. I think so.
My number 2 is the one, this was the first time I've been to it. And that was Death Valley.
Yeah, me too. It's my number 2.
Yeah, I thought so. So we're probably in agreement with number 1 too.
I'm sure we are.
We've always had the same number 1 ever since we've been to it.
Ever since we went to it the first time.
We'll get to that one later.
Yeah.
So
Death Valley. Okay, so first of all, just the idea of Death Valley is intriguing, is it not? The fact that you're going to go to a place that's completely inland and yet it's under sea level and it's not underwater. To me, that's just fascinating in and of itself. Okay, so we were on a road trip and as we were going to Death Valley, and our whole idea was that we wanted to spend some time coming in from, I believe we came in from the north, and we were coming actually from Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. So we were coming down, and one of the things we wanted to do was Manzanar National Memorial or National Monument. And that's one of the old Japanese internment camps. And so we wanted to make sure that we did that. And because we wanted to do that and we didn't want to take too much of our time away, we decided to spend the night in Lone Pine. Wasn't that the name of the town?
Lone Pine, which is a pretty cool little place to go anyway. It's kind of in its own valley, where on the west side of that valley, there's these old weather-beaten hills that are pretty much stripped down to boulders, just massive piles of boulders. And we did a little side drive through that area. And
the Alabama Hills.
Yeah, the movie hills. I guess they shot a lot of movies, Western movies in the 50s.
Old Western, spaghetti Westerns there.
And in fact, the hotel we stayed in, the Lone Pine Lodge, which is a Best Western, I believe. No, Comfort Suites, was the hotel that a lot of those movie stars stayed in, and the production stayed
crew.
in back in the 50s. So that was pretty cool. And yeah, Manzanar was just a little bit further up the road. And from there, you're coming in a little bit north, but more west, from the west into the park, a little bit from the north.
And we didn't realize how far the drive was going to be, but we decided to spend the night in Lone Pine because, well, it had a couple of good restaurants. It had Manzanar not too far away, and we were surprised by the Alabama Hills. But it had enough to do where we wanted to spend the night there and see some things. I think, did we spend 2 nights there?
Just one night.
Just one night, but we got there early enough in the day that we had lots of time to spend kind of exploring the area. We enjoyed it.
Exactly. That's kind of our modus operandi. We really like to do that. Get to the place where you're going to be spending the night early enough so that you can do some stuff there. And that worked out really good there. And then we got up early in the morning before
really
sunrise,
early,
so that we could try and get into the park as the sun was rising. And one of the good sunrise spots is in the dunes, which is one of the first stops that you get into once you're in the park. There's a little country store there and a gas station and a campground and that stuff.
But all of that's a little bit, I don't know. It makes it sound like it's close. It wasn't close at all. We had to get up. I think we got up at 5:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we got up and left by 5:30 in the morning. And we were going to go to McDonald's, but the McDonald's was closed that early. So we didn't get breakfast before we left, which or coffee, which was the important thing. But that's okay. We took off. We had a beautiful, even though it was still dark, we had a beautiful drive. There was lots of stars out, and we even saw, I think, 3 planets.
Mm-hmm.
And this is just with our naked eye as we were going. And of course, as the sun begins to rise, you see the outline of the mountains. It was spectacular. It was really gorgeous. And then it got really fun because as you start to descend, it tells you the elevation. So it would tell you, you're at 4,000 feet, you're at 3,000 feet, you're at 2,000 feet. And then it goes back up. Psych. Now we're going back. You're at 2,200 feet. You're at 2,600 feet. Oh, you're at 3,200 feet. Oh, and then it goes back down. It was just so much fun watching the elevation signs because you're expecting to get lower and lower and lower and lower. And actually, we did not hit the lowest part of the area until a good hour or so after we were in the park. So it was not what I kind of had envisioned in my head. I thought you get to the park, you're below sea level, everything's below sea level. Not the case.
Right. Well, like you said, we knew it. Everybody knows it's got the lowest point in North America, right? So you expect that you're going to be going down. What I guess I didn't expect was going up first, climbing up into almost mountains, pretty high hills before you go down. But that last strip where you're actually going down into the park is, it's otherworldly. It's just this long, steady downgrade where you're going further and further into the park and lower, and the sun's coming up, and the landscape is just like you said, it's magical. It is like being on another planet almost. And then you're in the park.
So as you get into the park, one of the first places you hit is the first little place to stop has a hotel and has a little gas station. And even at the hotel, anybody can go and get breakfast.
Yeah.
A buffet breakfast. So our plan was to get to the park. And like I said, we hadn't had coffee yet. So we were going to go to the gas station. It was supposed to open in 10 minutes. It was supposed to open at 7:00 in the morning, which was 10 minutes from when we got there.
That's right.
And we're like waiting around with a few other people from the campground there, waiting. And
there's a guy inside moving around doing stuff.
7:15, 7:25. We're starving to death. And we're like, okay, let's go across the street to the lodge and see what there is. So we looked at the buffet for $10.50 a person or something, and we weren't impressed. So we said, nope. Okay, it's 40 miles to the next bunch of things that we can possibly get breakfast at, we'll go there. On the way, we stopped at the dunes, like Jim said, as the sun was coming up. It was gorgeous. It was really beautiful. But meantime, we're hungry. And you know how it is when you're hungry. It sort of takes over your life.
Yeah, pretty soon all you can think about is the food.
So yes, we enjoyed the dunes. We got some pretty pictures, but we didn't probably take as much time there as we should have because we were hungry.
Yeah. So then we get to the big resort area in the park and find out the breakfast there is not, it actually looks worse than the other one.
And it was more expensive by like $7
yeah, and
a
it's
person.
more expensive. So we ended up just buying some stuff in the little store there and eating that.
Which was expensive.
Which was expensive. And they did have coffee. So we had some coffee.
The coffee was good.
So I would say for us, it was a fail as far as the food goes because we knew we should have had breakfast before we left Lone Pine. And according to their website, that should have been open before we left. But they had put up a little sign on the window saying, sorry, due to staffing, we're not open this morning. So
he's talking about the gas station.
No, I'm talking about in Lone Pine at the McDonald's.
Oh, you're talking about the McDonald's.
Yeah.
Well, we had the same thing happen when we got to the gas station.
That's right. I mean, we had some snack stuff in the car, but not really a meal, unfortunately. So we had put ourselves in that position, even though we tried everything to do to have that not happen.
We tried to be good little Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and be prepared, but it did not pan out the way we planned.
And things like that happen. So
it didn't dull our fun, though. We finally did get something to eat. We ended up buying a gas station burrito for breakfast.
Yeah, that's
right. The coffee was okay. The gas station burrito was not as okay. At that point, we didn't really care. We just needed basically to get something in our stomachs and get out there and enjoy Death Valley.
Yeah. The one thing that we should mention about the gas station we keep talking about is to make sure that you fill up with gas before you go into the park.
But it was also during the big crash with the gas. And so everywhere we're going, especially in California, the gas is rising. I think in California, our gas prices rose to $6.50,
the highest we saw at that point was in the $5s.
But then we got to the park, and the day we were inside the park at the gas station in the park, it was over $8.50.
Yeah.
Now, I don't think it got to $8.50 outside the park anywhere. But that just tells you don't want to buy gas. You don't want to have to buy gas at the park ever.
No. And unless you're staying there, I would say make sure you have your own food. Now, to be fair to us, we had loads of water. We had plenty of snacky stuff. We weren't
going to starve
We wouldn't
to death.
have ended up as bleached bones and skulls in the desert floor in Death Valley.
Not on that day, anyway.
But yeah, and yet somehow it's still our second favorite national park in California.
Yeah, because the things to do there are really beautiful. The sand formations, there are like Zabriskie Point, for example, is one of the points where you can go and see these sand, sort of like what do you call those sand paintings where you have the layered sands and they're all different colors? That's what it looks like, and it's really pretty. They had that, and they had a good museum about the borax, which... what an interesting thing all of it in and of itself, this chemical that people used to use for, what was it for, cleaning, I guess?
It's used for all kinds of industrial uses.
Anyway, so there's that. And of course, it was the way they did it back in the day. So they would haul it out with mule trains and it's just really fascinating. So they had that. They had a pretty nice, it's one of the parks that had a nicer, I would say, lodge area. They had a golf course. It was for the elite of the Los Angeles, socialites who wanted to go out there. So some of the stuff was really beautiful, but it cost quite a bit. And I didn't think the food was very good at all. It certainly wasn't luxurious, but the prices were.
So what I really enjoyed the most and was also a little bit dismayed by the most was the salt flats at Badwater Basin, where you have these pictures that you see the hexagonal shaped crystal structures of the salt as it evaporates on this big, huge pan, just shining white. And it's there, and it's massive. It's much larger than I expected. But so many people are out walking on it and trampling through the main thing that you didn't really get much of that effect that you could see. I was able to walk off to one of the sides and get away from the trail that the people were walking on to go really far out. And I did find some really good areas just to marvel at and take pictures. So it was there, but
it wasn't spectacular.
But what was better and unexpected, I didn't know anything about it, was the Devil's Golf Course.
And I didn't really understand why it was called the Devil's Golf Course. I guess I don't know much about golf. But basically it's salt crystals that come up off the ground, and they make these, really cool crystalline shapes. And that was pretty interesting. But again, the part where everybody stops was trampled. People are walking all through it. There's no... we didn't see a ranger there making people, pay attention to what they're doing. So we suggest that you don't go all the way to the end, but maybe stop before you get to the end and look around, because it was a little bit more pristine in other parts.
That's right.
I was reading, though, the best time to go is after a rain, which how many times does it rain in the Death Valley? Not very many. So I guess if you have time, it would be a great idea to go there. And if you had your RV or whatever and you just camped for a couple of weeks and then go out after a rain. But I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't know.
We weren't there after a rain, so we just don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
It was pretty cool while we were there.
We did do a lot of drives, and we saw, like I said, a lot of sand formations, and we just kind of enjoyed the whole differentness of it, because it is completely different than other places that we've been. Most of the national parks, I would say the majority, are usually forested, and the hikes are in beautiful mountain meadows, and you don't really have that here. It's just so barren and so otherworldly. It's very cool.
And it's actually really accessible if you're in Las Vegas. You could do it as an overnight trip, or even maybe a long day trip out of Las Vegas. From within California, we strung it on with, like we said, a road trip where we had gone to Kings Canyon and Sequoia, and then into Death Valley. So that worked pretty good with an overnight on the way in between Sequoia, and actually 2 overnights in between Sequoia and Death Valley.
I knew there was 2 nights, but only one night in Lone Pine.
One night outside of Sequoia, and then one night in Lone Pine.
That's what it was.
We could have done it in one night, but we wanted to have the time to.
We're really trying to slow down. We just retired, as you know, not too long ago. And before you're retired, you're so stuck to a schedule, and it's hard to get out of that mode of trying to get everything in. We were just talking about our mother-in-law on the phone this morning. Hope she doesn't feel upset about this, but she's done a lot of travel, and the way she travels has been, you go somewhere for 2 weeks, you knock it out, you do everything, you get tired, and it's okay, and then you rest when you get home. And that's still, that's so ingrained in her being that that's still how she wants to travel, even when she doesn't have to travel that way anymore. Maybe she never did, I don't know, but she definitely doesn't have to travel. She's Jim's stepmother. That means she's quite a bit older than we are. She's retired as well.
She could slow down.
She could. And I can't say anything because I think we have that same proclivity to, knock it out. Let's go here. Let's go there. Let's do this.
A lot of people do.
We're really trying to slow it down, because I think when you're able to slow down, you can absorb more. You can enjoy the moment more. You can take better pictures because you can wait for the light. And in this case, if we'd taken a few more days, maybe we would have gotten some rain. Who knows?
Yeah, you never know.
Anyway, if you haven't planned a trip to Death Valley, it's our number 2. Jim and I agree on that. And it really is a fantastic place to go. You can just spend a day there and see, I would say, the major things.
Yes.
However, I don't think you should go for less than 2 days. So whether or not you stay in one of the lodges, and I think you had 3 choices, or whether or not you have an RV and camp, that's up to you. But I think going all that way and seeing such an otherworldly landscape, at least spend 2 nights and 3 days out there. That's what I would suggest.
Yeah. I would say that you could get by with just one night, provided that you can get there early, you stay somewhere nearby before you spend the night in the park. Like we stayed in Lone Pine, so we were able to be in the park at sunrise. And
But we had to get up super early to do that.
We did. So we did see the sunrise in the park, but we didn't get a chance to see the sunset in the park, which would have been nice.
Exactly.
So that way, if you spend at least one night, you're definitely going to see a sunrise and a sunset. So I think that should be your bare minimum goal for sure.
Bare minimum.
If you don't have time and you just can do a day trip out of Las Vegas or on a road trip as you're driving somewhere else, it's definitely worth doing that for sure.
I think you could go all year long.
Yes.
I think that I was surprised at the elevations. We talked a little bit about this. So there are going to be times when it snows and you have to watch the roads. And those roads were steep and curvy.
Mm-hmm.
So if it does look like it's going to snow, I would pick another time to go. I changed my plans because I don't know about you, but I'm not going to be stuck in the snow. But I think other than that, any time of year would be good. Spring, if you could hit it where you're going to see some wildflowers on the drive in and the drive out, that would be spectacular. I mean, let alone if you hit it where there's actually a wildflower bloom in the park. But those are few and far between. So,
yeah. And there's not a whole lot of vegetation in Death Valley. So it's not the type of desert that's got a whole lot going on, even when it does bloom. But the ground cover is where you're going to see the flowers. And that is really pretty. And we did see some, but it's been very dry these last few years.
Very dry.
So not much.
Okay, so I think that's enough of Death Valley, our number 2 park.
Let's go to number 1.
We really, really enjoyed it. We loved it. Okay, so what is your number 1? The same as mine, or do I get to say it?
Go ahead and say it.
Okay, our number 1 park in California is Joshua Tree National Park. I don't know what it is about that place, but I love it.
It is just, to me, it's stunning. It is desert, but I think that even people who don't really care much for desert are going to be impressed with Joshua Tree because it's not just flat desert, dry, no vegetation, nothing to look at. No, Joshua Tree has, again, the same kind of like the Alabama hills that we were talking about outside of Lone Pine, where these ancient hills have just eroded down to piles of massive boulders or even just one massive boulder as a hill itself. So that part of the landscape is just incredible. Geologically, it's fascinating.
And inside the park, there is a geological self-drive tour, which we did do. And I'm not going to say it was fascinating. It wasn't fascinating to me. But it was a nice drive. And you did learn some things you didn't know before. And there weren't too many people on it. So you were getting away from some of the people that were there.
Yeah. And we did see a rattlesnake on that part of the drive.
And we did see a rattlesnake.
So that was pretty good. And a carload of Brits.
One that did not bite us.
The best kind. He was sleeping in the shade of some rocks.
Yeah. Yeah. We saw a rattlesnake in the wild.
So the other thing there, of course, is the Joshua trees themselves,
which are so fascinating. I just think the way they look like a cactus, but they're a tree, but they're spiky, but their flowers are in these like pineapple shaped cones almost. The whole thing is just, I don't know, kind of like something out of Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, there's also a lot of smaller brush. And if you're lucky enough to be there when there is some flowers, they're just beautiful. They're stunning.
I think, well, the first time we went, our kids were, I would say, not preteens. Yeah, preteen to teenagers. They were, right in that middle school age group and really awkward age group. And we were out there and, you can climb so many rocks and it's just so much fun. I think it's one of the best parks for kids because there are so many different things to do. And the best thing was just climbing this rock and then going over to this rock rope and climb those rocks. It's fun.
Yeah. Just setting up in the shade of one of these hills, nestled up against a rock cliff for a picnic. That's cool. The campground there, we've not stayed in the campground, but it looks really cool. It's on our list of places to stay for sure.
And we will be going for the maximum time allotted, which I think you can stay for 2 weeks.
Yeah, there's a couple of the campgrounds there where the sites are all just like the picnic area, nestled in and around these outcroppings of the hills and the stones
And the boulders.
and the bulldozers. And there's little bulldozers and the boulders. And it's just a stunning campground. Both of the ones that we went through.
It's really cool because you can almost not see in a lot of places, you can't see the next campground because they're like almost little divots. And like you did it on purpose, but there's no way to do it. I mean, this is just the way the rocks fell.
It's all natural formations.
It's so cool. And some of the rocks are towering above you. And I mean towering. They're huge. And then some are not so big. And that's cool because it's by the rocks. When I mean cool, I don't mean hot cool. It's cool both ways. It's really cool to look at and fun to be around, but it's also temperature wise cool.
If you can be in the shade, especially. It's not a super hot area of California because it's high desert. So it does cool off at night. You do have to be ready for that if you're going to be spending the night there.
I don't think any of the RV parks, campgrounds had hookups.
No, it's all dry camping.
Yeah.
And also, if you're going to be there at night, the stargazing there is incredible.
Well, and the sunset.
And the sunsets.
The sunsets were, spectacular. Getting the sunset through those Joshua trees, it's just the coolest thing. And the sunrise was gorgeous too.
At the Cholla Cactus Garden.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I think that was one of my favorite things is going to the Cholo Cactus Garden for sunrise. And it's all over the interwebs, all over the place. It says that's one of the number one places to go.
And it is.
And it is. There were tons of people there. So that was maybe a little bit of a bummer. But we went during high season and we still got plenty of pictures and we were extremely happy with what happened, how it all went down. And it's on its way out on one of the roads. So that's what we did is we kind of left the park that way. And then we had this great breakfast at this hole in the wall place along the highway. So everything about it just sort of worked out. And after, a few times when we hadn't had good meals because we got up so early, this one actually worked out for us.
That's right. So amount of time that you're going to spend there, again, I would say you need at least one overnight, either in the park or very near to the park. And there are places where you can stay outside the park where you're not far away and you could still get in for sunrise. In fact, we were staying at the 29 Palms Marine Base.
Which we've never stayed in a Marine base before, I don't think.
But we stayed in their lodging on base, a little bit cheaper than off base, and nice place. If you have the military affiliation, that's always a good option to check on. Don't always get as lucky as finding openings as we used to in the past, but when you do, it can be a good way to go. But we were able to get up and get going from 29 Palms and get to Cholla Cactus Garden before sunrise without really pushing it too hard. So
and the same thing with leaving. We didn't leave until it was pitch dark, but it's close enough. We don't really like driving in the dark, especially out on back roads or national park roads because of wildlife and who knows what else is out there. So our general rule is to try and not drive too much after dark. But, sometimes you can't avoid it. We do want to see those sunsets and we do love stars. And like I said, so yeah, we enjoyed getting there really late at night and also getting up early, and it was close enough. Now, the thing that I was kind of disappointed on with Joshua Tree is this the first park I've been to that had tiny, not very good visitor centers.
Yeah.
Usually you get to a visitor center and there's, lots of things to buy and there might be a cafe, not always. But you have good restrooms and you can buy your tickets and you can talk for a while. But the Joshua Tree Visitor Center, we only went to one of the two. The other one might have been bigger. But the one in Joshua Tree Town is so small and you wait in line and you can't really get out of the line. You pick up your souvenirs as you're going through. I don't know. I wasn't impressed with the visitor center.
Yeah, pretty small.
Oh, and you had to use porta potties. I'm sorry. Any place I have to use a porta potty, I'm not impressed with.
Well, inside the park, the bathrooms weren't bad. Again, it was what you'd expect in a national park. It was the pit latrine.
But they don't smell as bad as porta potties.
No, they're not nearly as bad. So one night, again, you're going to see a sunrise and a sunset as a minimum, safely and comfortably, for sure. More than that, there's some excellent hiking there. If you have 2 nights, do some of the mine trails, and just get into some of the wilder parts of the park. But you don't really need to. You're going to see everything you want to see from the main driving roads or the main secondary roads.
I think anybody who's been there will agree that Joshua Tree is one of those places that really sort of gets you, you know? It's a different kind of place. It's unique. Everybody's in a good mood while they're there because there is so much to do. Even though it does get crowded, there's plenty of space. You can ride bikes. You can, I don't know. It's just really a nice place. I just enjoyed it.
It's unexpectedly beautiful, I think.
It really is.
And we were there the first time we went a long time ago.
Was in the fall. We were there in the fall and it was perfect weather. It was just warm enough during the day that you could go outside without a jacket on, but, you know, not be like boiling in the sun and climb all around and have a good time. And the colors were, you know, more muted, I think. This time we went in spring and we were there during the Joshua Tree bloom, which was, in my opinion, pretty spectacular. We were at the beginning of it too, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
So yeah, if we'd waited a week, which we didn't, because, you know, why not? I don't know.
It's just the way the timing fell.
If we'd waited a week, I think it would have been even more spectacular. But even what we saw as far as the bloom, it was really pretty. And there was not the only flowering cactus. There were a few other ones too. So we really enjoyed that part of it. I think the spring probably would be the best time to go, but fall was beautiful too. Yeah. I think the middle of summer might be a little too hot. Yeah. We'd love to hear what your 3 favorite parks are in California. How many parks have you been to in California? How many national parks have you been to altogether? If you join our private Facebook group, then you can be part of the conversation and you can tell us what you think. What's important to you and what's not important to you, what you look for in a national park, whether it's good for kids, what kind of camping. We'd love for you to join our Facebook group and let us know about that. It's called Streets and Eats. It's easy to find and it's private.
Yeah, join up and join in the conversation. All right. Thanks for listening to this episode of Streets and Eats. If you liked what you heard, please show us some love, hit the like button, and leave us a review. Maybe even subscribe so you don't miss any future podcasts. Also, we'd love it if you joined us on our Facebook private group, Streets and Eats, where we just have an ongoing conversation about all things travel. Ciao for now.